Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. We give all praise to Allah, Most High, Most Gracious, and we send prayers and peace upon His Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Assalamu alaikum. We welcome those who are in attendance physically and those who are joining us virtually to the fourth Sunday joint Ta'leem with between the Ephraim Bahaar Cultural Center and Masjid Al-Taqwa. We're here on site today at Masjid Al-Taqwa, and we just got through offering Salatul Zuhr. But before we get into our program, we want to make sure that I'm going to invite my brother Imam Omar Kareem to come up and to give a few greeting words, and then we'll get into our presentation of that, inshallah.
Dear believers, Assalamu alaikum. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. I'm not gonna just say a few words, but I just want to say we had a very, very wonderful time yesterday at our Eid celebration. It was the spirit was up. We had a program, but everybody wanted to do karaoke, so that's what happened. So it stayed until the end. And, Allah blessed us. We had a lamb slaughtered, and Brother Shamsuddin, he did it. Him and his wife and his did the slaughtering for us. And we had a few people to prepare it, and we had, we had enough. We had enough. But it just really goes to show the spirit of unity and how we need to build on that spirit of unity. I've learned a lot on this journey, and realized that, my college experience in marketing really come into fruition with this here work that we're doing in this community. And if we want this to grow, we have to realize that we're going to have to market it. And to market it, I don't mean just market, you have to put together a campaign, just like you run for office. You have to put together a real marketing campaign, because there are a lot of people that are looking for alternatives to the influences that we have out there in the society right now. And we know that we have it here in Islam. So how do we tap into it? We have to market. I was talking with a brother from Launch Good last week, and man, he really, really laid some bombshells on me about, even before we even launch, what we got to do, how we have to begin to prep and prime and get everybody ready before you even launch. And I was like, wow, I said, we're not even ready to launch. I'm just don't think we're going to put something together and just get it started and go. No, it's all about marketing. It's all about marketing. So let's be happy, with the success that we have in coming together and doing things, but not be satisfied. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing us that this world, what we see what's happening in Gaza, we see what's happening in other parts of the world, that dictators and people who want to rule with power have no problem in destroying the lives of individuals, a human being. They just treat them like they roaches, step on them and kill them, and just no problem, and eat their steaks and different things like that. So don't think that might not happen here. Don't think that we live in a country that's almighty and powerful. Listen, this same country is the one that's providing the weapons for them to destroy the people in Gaza. All right. So don't think that the mindset of Donald Trump and different people like that will not influence people to start something, a campaign here in the United States of America. you know? So we have to be prepared and offer an alternative along with these crazy alternatives that these people are offering. Thank you very much, dear believers. Assalamu alaikum.
We thank Imam Omar for his words and the perspective that he shared. And it is interesting that what you brought up is definitely related to our topic today. So alhamdulillah for that. You know, there are no original ideas. I want you to understand, you know, it hits a group, you know, and it's really just dependent upon who responds to the idea, right? So that's one of the things that we're here for, is to show a collective response. All right, so the title that we want to present today, it is prophetic. What is it? Prophetic lessons for healing. I want to make sure I'm giving the right title. Prophetic inspirations for community healing. And we begin. Well, actually, let us open up with our Fatiha. That is perfect for us. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Okay. So when we think about prophetic inspirations, we are looking at the totality of all the messages that have been sent with revelation. As a matter of fact, I would say not just the prophets, right? Not just the prophets, those who brought scripture, but those who also came to remind societies, to call them back to right guidance, to correct living, right? So we know, I think the number is about 125,000, something like that. Like throughout the course of time, we only know about 25, right? There are 25 that are mentioned in the Quran of the prophets. And each of the prophets was a sociologist. Each of the prophets was a sociologist. I want to give you the definition. I'm sure many of us are familiar with the term, but the definition for sociology is the study of society, social institutions, and social relationships. It involves examining the ways in which human behavior, social structures, and cultural norms interact and shape various aspects of life. The discipline explores a wide range of topics, including family dynamics, education systems, religious practices. There's a lot more. Religious practices, political institutions, economic behavior, and more. And sociologists, they use a variety of research methods such as surveys, interviews, observations, and such to gather information. But the point being, the sociologists, they examine all of every intersection for human life. They examine the economic, the religious, the educational, the political, all of these different areas that they look at. And this cannot be better exemplified than in the example that we are given in the prophetic missions. And particularly, we look at Prophet Ephraim alayhi salam. Right? His as a matter of fact, what is it said in the Quran? It says that he who attains the station of Abraham, the maqam of Ibrahim, they attain what? This is not just me talking, just throw it out there. We test a little knowledge here. They attain what? What blessings? Yes, they attain what? Blessing, the blessing of security, peace. They have security, right? It's a secure station, right? The station, the maqam is the station. But whoever is in that station, and it's not just the physical station, right? If you go to, if you're on the Hajj, you recognize, you see there is an actual maqam of Ibrahim, right? There's an actual station where, you know, you stop, you make dua. But the station from a practical application, right? In our collective lives, in our community life, what is that station? That is a station of inquisition. It's a station of a question. It's a station of examination, right? Of looking at society. And before we jump into how that examination comes about, I think it's critically important for us to understand that the example of Ibrahim alayhi salam it goes in the exact, it is the polar opposite of what is given to us as the expectation of youth in today's society. All right, and what do I mean by that? What I mean is this, is that Ibrahim alayhi salam was a young man, was a teen, right? He was a young man when he came to this conclusion of the oneness of Allah. He was a young man when he came to his father and approached him or reproached him about idol worship. And not just idol worship, but about the manufacturing of idols. Right? This was his father. What was his father's name? Bahaar? Azar, right? So it was not just the consumption of idol work, but it was also the manufacturing of idols. But how does this play into what we expect of our young people today? I'll tell you. Our young people have been given an expectation that they don't have to be serious until they become much older people. That they have the luxury of, well, matter of fact, you see, if you watch, movies, you'll see this, you'll hear this line over and over again. I'm just a kid. I'm just a kid. I was just watching something the other day, and the kid said, I'm just a kid. Well, in our tradition, our understanding is that we become mukhallaf, we become responsible, right? We become responsible for our actions, responsible to Allah at what age? At puberty, right? At puberty. That's the time of seriousness. It's a time of it's a transition. It's a time where we become aware of responsibility, where we become accountable for our contributions. Not just to be sitting around and I'm just waiting for you to do something for me. I'm just waiting. I can be a child forever. No. The example of Ibrahim, it is the exact counter of that. What it says is that there's a responsibility to be first and foremost observant and questioning, right? I'm going to take a little detour and I'm going to come back to that in a second. Have you all heard about what is the most important position in any movement, like social movement of people? Like which is the most important position? Is it the first person or the second person? Okay, well, they'll tell you, saw this TED talk about social movements. And what they say is that the most important person in a social movement is not the first person, it's the second person, right? It's the person who comes up and they support that first person, right? And there could be some merit to that. But I would say that that's not actually in accordance with the prophetic example that we've been given. The prophetic example is one that says, and the prophetic example is not just illustrated by the prophets, it's illustrated by those who have followed the prophets. So I'm going to work my way backwards, most recently, and I'm going to go back. Consider Bilal, radiallahu anhu. May Allah be pleased with him. Out by himself, right? He is a lowly enslaved person. He has no economic power, no political power. He has no clan. He has nothing. He has no resources. The only thing that he has is his conviction. The conviction and the belief in the oneness of Allah. The belief that everything that the society of idolaters, the society of pagans, is holding to be dear and true, that it is false, that it is not right to assign partners to Allah. And he has the conviction to say so, even at the threat of, not just the threat, but even under duress, under great physical duress. He has the conviction to say, no, la ilaha illallah, ahad, there's only one God. That type of conviction, right? That is the type of conviction. Matter of fact, let me give you another example. Musa alayhi salam, when he asks Allah to show himself to him. Who remembers what happens? Let's see. He said, you can't.
Look at that mountain.
Musa, yeah.
Look at that mountain.
Yeah.
Look at that mountain.
Look at that mountain.
You will see what I can do.
Right.
You don't need to see me.
Yes. Yes. And what happens after the mountain is it vanishes. It's crumbled right in front of him. Right. And he is left in a swoon. Right. He's lightheaded. And I want to make a popular culture reference. There's a line, if you listen to rap, you'll hear, especially West Coast, they talk about, you can't see me, right? They put that in, and that's kind of a way of them showing that, there are levels above you, you can't see me, right? Allah was the first to say that. Allah was the first to say, you can't see me, you cannot see me, right? But what was the response? The response after Moses was swooned and he came back, he said what? He said, man, he says, I am, he says some things first. He says, I am the first to believe. I am the first to believe. I don't need anybody else stepping up in front of me to demonstrate faith, to profess faith, right? To say they're believers. I don't have to follow on anybody's coattails. I am the first to believe. That's a mindset. That's a conviction that's not dependent upon anybody else. It's not dependent upon power. It's not dependent upon influence or resources. He says, man, Allah, you are that one. He says, I am the first to believe. And you know who also says, and I am the first to believe? We hear this in the dua of Ibrahim, right? What's the dua? Again, he said, first. Yeah, isn't that's also a part of when Ibrahim, he's told to dedicate every part of himself, right? Every part of saying, my prayer, my service of sacrifice, my living and my dying, right, are all for Allah, the Lord of the world, right? So this type of perception and this profession, right? This statement, this proclamation, this is the seat of the courage that produced the action that Ibrahim displayed in front of or with his father. Right? There's nothing else. There's nothing else for me to talk about. There's nothing else for me to do. Right? You don't have to convince me, and I'm not waiting for anybody else to come along. Right? I'm the first one. I'll be the first. So while society tells us that, well, not society, but some sociologists would tell us that the most important in the movement is the second one, right? For you to wait for validation. The prophetic teaching, the prophetic example is one that says that once you realize, you must stand up. You must stand up. You must be accountable, right? Regardless of what is in front of you, right? We must do that. All right. So I took a detour, and I was speaking about Ibrahim as a sociologist. It's all of the prophets are, right? So this idea of idolatry, this concept of idolatry, and Ibrahim Islam's journey to recognizing the roots of its weakness, the roots of its fallacy. All right. So what did he do? He says he looks at three things, and we understand first of all before we mention those three things, we know that Allah gives us in the Quran. He says we have three ways that we are able to see it. Right? The literal, metaphorical, allegorical. Right? So metaphor, when Allah says, Allah disdains not to use a similitude of things lowest as well as highest, right? He will use whatever example, right? He will use people, he will, to express an idea or a concept. He'll use objects, he'll use the constellations, right? All of these things. He says there are signs in the heavens and in the creation, there are signs within yourself, right? So these are the similitudes that Allah uses. And sometimes these things are the similitude, sometimes is a metaphor, All right. So the metaphor, is raining cats and dogs. Right? So we know that it means it's coming down hard, right? And sometimes things are literal, right? But the example that Allah gives us in the Quran when He says about Ibrahim's journey to certitude, He tells us that he looked at what? He said he looks at the creation, he looks into the heavens, right? And he sees the moon. Oh, stars first, right? Stars, then the moon, then the sun, right? And Allah has told us is that the constellation said we use them to do what? We use them for direction so that we can traverse the earth, right? So, and then we use the moon and the sun. These two things are mated, right? He says we use them for what? It says these things have been given to you for what? That you would know the passage of time. So as we order our affairs according to the passage of time, right? But without that, I'll see you at 5 o'clock wouldn't mean anything at all, right? You show up at 7 and I show up 2 weeks from now at the same time, right? So we have to have some consistencies. So Allah, in this, we can look at, yes, Ibrahim alayhi salam looked at the moon, the stars, and the sun, and each one of them he thought was great, and each the succeeding one that came, it removed the idea, right? Said, no, this must be it, right? And then he comes to the next, no, this must be, it's the greatest of all, right? Talk about the sun. Then he comes to the conclusion, right? The cause and effect. He says, no, I worship the one that has put all of these things in motion, that has created all of these things. So I'm witnessing systems. I'm not going to worship the system. I'm going to worship the creator of the system, right? So there's a logic, right? There's an observation that's taking place, and it brings them to what? It brings them to certitude, brings them to a certainty of faith. So, but how do we see these things? How do we use these things in terms of from a metaphorical standpoint, and connecting them to the idols that he pushed against? Well, understand this. The idols were the center of a people's faith. Right? These are the things that they called on when times got bad. These are the things that they called on when they wanted good fortune, when they wanted health. These are the things that they called on when they were like, man, I don't know if I should take this new job or not. What do you think, little oatmeal man? That I made with my own hands, but I'm going to invest my faith in this thing. We lose a part of the lesson if we look at these things simply as individual creations. Because what did Ibrahim alayhi salam look at? He looked at a system of movement. The constellations, broad, right? In motion. The moon, in motion. The sun is in motion. We don't get to see it, but the galaxy itself is in motion. And for some of you who are worried about what's going to happen 4 billion years from now, the Milky Way and the Andromeda, they're supposed to collide. Yeah, we don't have to worry about that. Should be no anxiety over that. But he looked at systems. So when we consider him looking at the idols and breaking the idols, we can't look at them as simply looking at an individual man made of wood or a stone, or like I said, some of them they make them out of oatmeal or whatever it is they made them out of. We have to look at him as he was examining, he was destroying the systems. He was questioning the systems that people had placed all of their faith in. Man-made systems, right? That were separated from the remembrance of Allah. Right. So, all right, now I'm gonna bring this up to date right now. Right, because what you mentioned, Imam Omar, is you talk about marketing. Right, marketing is the hub of every industry that is the beneficiary of public trust. Marketing. And sometimes that marketing is outright in front of your face. Sometimes it is very subtle, but that trust and the reliance is still there, right? So, what was I saying? Marketing, so bringing this up to our current position that we're in right now. Give you a little bit of history, and then bring this to a point where we understand our collective responsibility, right? Our collective responsibility, it is the correction, it's the healing of the institutions that govern life, that governs life, right? And that's what the Quran gives us. And that's why so much of the Quran, it focuses on fairness in business dealings, right? It focuses on the social issues that it focuses on the fair treatment of orphans. It focuses on, business dealings and relationships, right? It even focuses on the news, right? We didn't realize anybody know the portion that's in there about the news? No, just about the news. The news, the media, about just the 10 o'clock news, the 5 o'clock news, whatever. No, it's one-sided, but there's an ayat that has direct said that. Well, no, not the good news. But so that the ayat is, it says, if they would have, matter of fact, I believe this is related to Aisha radiallahu anha, when she got left behind, right? And I believe this is in the same, so it's two places, but the space where it says, if they would have taken whatever information that they got and brought it to the proper people, they would have investigated it. That ring a bell? Y'all know what I'm talking about? Right? They would have investigated, right? And in that investigation, that would have averted any sense of public discord, right? It would have taken care of any suspicion, any gossiping, all of the stuff that comes about from information just being thrown out without being verified. But that's our news media. That's the system that we operate under today, or that they operate under, right? Whoever is first. It doesn't matter if it's true. It just matters if you're first, right? It doesn't matter if you have proof. And matter of fact, the more salacious, right, the more dirty and down low it is, the better it is, right? We understand, another quick side note, we understand that, I believe it was the president of CNN or one of these large outlets. They said that they were talking about their coverage of Donald Trump in his first campaign. And they said, man, we made so much money. We made so much money. It didn't matter that he was not fit to be even considered for the job. It didn't matter that he had no real platform other than to denigrate, to divide, right? Didn't matter. But the point is, he's salacious. They want to say he's provocative, right? He's comment, right? But he's an entertaining comment. And he strikes the chord of a whole subset of folks out here who will choose whiteness over democracy, right? So they say we made so much money. We made so much money, and they're ready to put the cameras on them again. But the point being, if we are using Quranic ethics, then that type of coverage never exists. As a matter of fact, most of the coverage that we see in the news media, it doesn't exist, just by applying that one principle, right? That one principle. So the institutions and idolatry, and by idolatry, again, I want to emphasize, we're talking about a trust, a reliance on, right? So you all remember, so we got a few sectors that, like I said, sociologists, right? They look at politics, economics, education, all of these different things, right? And we would also include media in there as a part of the examination of sociology, right? And this is all a part of what shapes culture, right? This is all a part of what shapes culture. There were, can anybody tell me how many companies control the media right now in the United States of America as an institution? We got a bunch of, how many? Two? Nope, not three. You're close. Six. There are six conglomerates that cover, they control just 90% of the media in the United States of America. 90%, right? Which means that remembering that they're not using those Quranic ethics of examining, right, what they actually put out. They just put out whatever they want to put out. They put it out for the purpose of what people relying upon their viewpoints or shaping their viewpoints, shaping sentiments, right? So 6 companies. There are, prior to the, well, I'll ask you this right now. How many, you know how many companies control, how many banking companies control the majority of banking in the US? 3. Yep. Three banks. As a matter of fact, no, actually it's 5. It's 5. So JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Citibank, and US Bank. Now, they did. They all benefited from that. But what folks may not be aware of is that before the Great Depression, there were about 25,000 banks operating. Right? And then afterwards, it dropped down to about 14,000. Right? So, and you know, we're not going to get into the conspiracy theory because this is recorded. So that's some stuff offline. Yeah. Well, the truth is, I don't care, I'm gonna say it. The truth is that was a manufactured incident. Right? And it was to clear the field. And now today we have a little bit over maybe about 4,500 banks. 4,500 banks, mostly owned by 5 banks. So we got 5 banks, 5 major banks. We got 6 news outlets. And then if we go to, and consider this, I'm sorry, not just news outlets. What I should have said was media in general. Media in general. So they control not just the news, they're talking about the movies, radio, everything, all facets of media. 6 companies. All right. Yeah.
No.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, it's sort of a monopoly, right? Well, I mean, monopoly signifies one, but it's a very exclusive club. Yeah. Okay. Our educational system. Who knows where? Well, I know my teachers know this. Where most of our textbooks come from. And how many companies are responsible for all of the textbooks that are in the majority of the public schools in the United States of America? Texas. And it's 2 companies, McGraw Hill, and there's another, no. Miller? McMillan? Well, it's like 2 companies, 2 major companies that are responsible for putting together the textbooks, right? And that's why you can find, textbooks where it says that African Americans benefited from slavery because they learned skills, they learned teamwork, hard work. And we can go down the line, right? And we have how many political parties right now? How many viable? Yeah, 2. 2 viable political parties that pretty much share the same agenda. Okay? And when we think about Ibrahim alayhi salam's fight against breaking the idols, right? He was breaking idols, the systems that were really holding people back. He was breaking the systems that were oppressing the people. And the people, here's the thing that we have to remember, especially as people who have to be willing to be the first to stand up. It's that sometimes oppressed people do not want to be free. Right? Because he came to his father, and what was his father's response? He said, look, man, you better lay off. You know, you better lay off. You're gonna make me hit you, but get out of my house. You know, leave. I'm a part of the system. I make money in the system, right? My livelihood is dependent upon it. And this is a very real concern that most people have who are in the system, is that I can't afford for the system to be broken. I got a good job. I'm making, you know, this is how I pay my bills. But what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell the Meccans? He tells the Prophet and the and the believers. He tells them, he says, after this year of theirs, the pagans will no longer be allowed to come into the sacred precincts. It says, because they are unclean. It says, and if you are worried about, I'm paraphrasing this portion here. He says, if you're worried about your provision, right? Because we understand that the Hajj was also, there's an economic component tied to the Hajj. This is how these people made the bulk of their money, right? Hajj season come around, and, you know, man, if you don't make it during the Hajj season, you know, you out of there. It says, don't worry, Allah will provide. Allah is the best provider. So yes, there is an economic component, you know, where our interests become intertwined with corruption, right? Because we got to eat, we got to live. So how do we break these idols? How do we break these idols and still live? Well, it starts with, number one, it starts with faith. It starts with faith. And we also have to understand that we have been conditioned to live with a deficit, with a scarcity mindset. That there is not, and this is a big part of the discussion that we're having right now. Political implications aside, right? Political outcomes aside, the conversation that we're having about immigrants right now, it's not a human conversation we're having. We're having political conversations. And the political conversation is because we have been indoctrinated into this idea that there's only so much to go around. There's only so much to go around, right? So I can't afford to have you over here. But Allah tells us as Muslims that we are to give to not just those we know. He doesn't define righteousness just based on giving to our families, although we start with the families. He said, give to those who ask, those who don't ask, the wayfarer, right? The orphan. So our spiritual sensibilities become muted because of the political reality that we live in. The political reality dictates that, man, it's not enough, go back to where you came from. But spiritually, we understand, you may one more.
I agree with you. You know, it's muted. Our spiritual reality becomes muted against our education, or whatever. We could be professionals.
Yeah.
We could be educated people, and we can have good jobs, and we could be on CNN and be anchor people and professional people in business and industry and whatnot. But because of our spiritual life being muted, we don't have a consciousness of ourselves. You know, so it's just like I tell people all the time. I say, you know, we got a lot of people that's in a professional field, and I'm not, I'm using women just for an example because they're out there. When you look at them on the news and whatnot, you actually see a white, even though she's black. Why I say that? The weave, the hair, the style, it's not us. And I'm not beating on what I'm saying is that our natural beauty.
Yeah.
We have been muted against that.
Yeah.
That natural beauty. You know, and a lot of it is because of what has happened to us. So if we come out as our natural self, our hair, our eyes, without anything and whatnot, we don't see beauty. But if we put on this costume, it's a costume. You got to put the hair on, you got to put the makeup, and men too.
Yeah.
Men doing it too. You know, so our spiritual life is muted in this environment. And is muted to the point that we can't elevate. So we need people that has faith to be examples. People see you and say, you different, you ain't like us. You don't dress like us. It's 90 degrees outside, y'all wearing long dresses and different things like that, and everybody else got shorts up in here and everything out here, you know? What's up with that?
Yeah.
You know?
I think that's a great point. That actually leads me into, because it's a disservice to talk about our spiritual sensibilities without talking about material expression, right? We cannot be just people with spiritual sensitivities, right? Our spiritual sensitivities requires material expression, and that goes back to this idea of marketing, right? And institutions, right? Muslims, we are not anti-institution at all, right? As a matter of fact, I believe the best of society throughout its history are those examples where you see Islamic institutions in correct, full application, right?
Allowance.
Well, it goes without saying, but maybe we should say it, right? Yes, halal, Islamic halal, permissible, good and uplifting institutions, right? So I brought all these things, these different institutions. Yes. Oh, I brought these different institutions up, the education, the economic, and the media. And then faith is also an institution, right? As a matter of fact, it is probably one of the most, go ahead, brother. Four? What for? Oh, yeah, absolutely. And the four birds, yeah, brother Powell was just saying. So the four birds. So our expression, our spiritual sensitivities, they reach material expression in that idea of those four birds, right? Business, government, education, culture.
Well, four birds and four birds. Both those analogies work.
Yes.
They got no water.
Absolutely.
For rivers, biblical base, for birds are provided.
Correctly.
Yeah.
So it's a religious thing.
And it's a religious theme there's a practical application for that, right? And if we are not focused on building institutions, right? And I'll tell you right now, it's probably the easiest time. It's probably the easiest time in the history that we are aware of to actually build institutions. I mean, from credit union to our own media, education. This is the easiest time. Unfortunately, if there is not buy-in, if people are not aware, if there's not enthusiasm around those things, people don't trust those things, then those things won't be successful. And if there's not one, right, it begins with somebody, right, and not just as a community, but somebody always has to be the charge for whatever that is. It doesn't mean that they're the only person, but somebody has to be willing to stand up and say, okay, I'm going to lead this particular effort on behalf of community, in the hopes of, with the intention of establishing institutions, right, that lift us up. And when that person moves out the way, somebody else steps up right behind them. All right. But we have this spirit of willing to be the first is something that we have to really focus on. And I'm going to go back to my young people again. In the example of Ephraim alayhi salam, it's brought back again. It's punctuated with Ismail alayhi salam, right? two young people who took on, I mean, who made grown folks decisions, right? The first was the profession. When he's professing, you know, I'm not with these idols. I'm here to break the idols. And then his son, given to him in old age, right? His valuable and beloved son, who is willing to, as he said, he's at the stage of serious work, right? So he's responsible for himself. He makes the decision that if this is what Allah has told you to do, I'm willing to give my life. Youth is not as long as you think it is. And until we really get to the point where we have our, as a social norm, kind of going back to some of the things I believe we lost from maybe 40, 50 years ago. You know, I mean, child labor laws are important. I mean, that's way more than that. That's was it 20s? I think, yeah. Because you had little 7-year-olds going to work in the morning, you know, working 10-hour shifts. Yeah. Get that money. You know, so I'm gonna make this point. I'm gonna turn it to you guys to see. But this idea that youth and what happens is that our actual youth is wasted. Our youth is wasted because we don't get serious until we're what, in our 30s, 40s, maybe. When really we should have had a serious mindset. We should have been getting serious 13, 14 years old, getting ready to move into seriousness. Yes. I'm sorry. Brother, see.
I think a contemporary example of success is John Elijah Muhammad himself.
Of course.
Okay. And we have existing examples. Okay, we don't have to go far. We go right over here, okay, to your sister and your mother, okay, creating an example of how to succeed regardless of the economy, okay, regardless of the distractions. You know, I mean, let's face it, you know, and John Elijah Muhammad said himself, his son followed it up, and we have extreme successes, extreme existing current successes. Imam Bachi out in New York, Imam Lukman, okay, in Philadelphia, you know, in Newark, Miraz Baraka, okay, getting ready to run for governor, already the mayor of Newark. You see what I'm saying? So we don't have to be searching all over. We got examples we can study from, and they're right here.
Yeah. Thank you. Imam Omar.
So, you know, one thing about it is that all of us as parents, we really do our best, you know, to try to make sure that our children are in a nurturing environment that nurtures the entire human person.
Sure.
Mentally, their spiritual life, you know, their physical life and whatnot. But we also are up against a force you mentioned earlier with the conglomerate media, you know what I'm saying, with your relatives, you know, with the environment outside, with the bus that they ride, that is continuously tapping at that influence and making them feel strongly outside. So if they wear their Muslim identity as a strong in this environment, I mean, in that environment, you know, it really takes a strong child, a strong individual to sit back and stand up and wear their Muslim life in this environment, because the television is against you, your friends against you, you're not going to a Muslim school, you know what I'm saying? So you feel outside, you know what I'm saying? So you have all of this. And so the environment makes it, it's like a roller coaster. You go down a roller coaster and you be hollering, and the wind blowing the holler back in your mouth. You know what I'm saying? So it makes it difficult. You know what I'm saying? To make that expression with that, you know?
Yeah. It was. But glad.
So, you know, believe that Allah puts that the word greater than fail.
Yeah.
So if this is what we are facing, we must have in us the strength to bear it, be successful at it, and to make a change in this world. And I appreciate every reference to Muhammad. But not rely on Muhammad to do us that.
That's right.
The odds against him were made compared to the odds against us. And many of us go out into society as one and make major changes in institutions where we are today as we did yesterday. And what the biggest tragedy, the biggest casualty of all of this stuff that we talk about, the biggest casualty is hope.
Yes.
Because once you don't have the hope that you can succeed at, you know how to get worked up about something that you're thinking about.
Yeah.
It's just hard to get started. So you have to deny. If you find yourself thinking it's impossible, realize you're being deluded in that moment.
Yeah.
The
Absolutely.
delusion that is.
Absolutely. And what we were, and as we close up, I want to just remind us when, you know, when the event has been made, you know, we repeat everything except for the Hayya Salah, Hayya Falah. And in that moment, we're saying, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, right? There's no power or strength except with Allah. To remind ourselves, when we lose hope, it is almost tantamount to shirk. It is tantamount to saying that Allah does not have the power, does not have the ability to make a change, right? That's what Allah reminds us in the Quran all the time. It says, how many times is a small force, right? Overwhelmed, you know, had victory over a large force, right? It's and how many times has a messenger gone into battle with with a large good group of goodly men. And I think it's almost not sarcastic, but a way to say that you're not going to have the multitude with you, right? You're not going to have the multitude with you. Go ahead and yeah.
Feedback on the slide, you know, what you just said, you know, that you know, Allah says that if you have 100 in faith, then you can vanquish 1,000.
Yeah.
And if you have 1,000 in faith, you can vanquish even more. So the thing is that collectively, you know, you like this here, you're stronger. When you like this here, then you are like this here. And what made us more successful as an example in the nation of Islam, in that situation, is that we built together. You know what I'm saying? We were a force, you know, to build together. Now, a lot of people misunderstanding that Muhammad unraveling and making us an autonomous. I use that language per se. Some people don't like that language, autonomous. But I'm gonna use autonomous to sit back and say this here, is that being autonomous, meaning that you create that which we had. Don't mean that you just stay autonomous by yourself. So you create that nation where you at. You create that nation, Bahaar where we at. You create that nation, Masjid where we at. You create that nation, Philadelphia, New York, Atlanta, all the little different towns. And then it really explodes like foam. You see foam just, just go out.
Yeah.
You know. So we have to see how that the strength in that unity. I forgot my ending point. But,
yeah. All right. I knew he was gonna do it. Go ahead. Oh, I just realized they could not hear.
Want me to come up?
You said they could. You heard it? The people speaking? Go ahead.
I was listening to a program earlier, Words Make People. Yes, they recently went to Rome for the Lord. And that was one of the sessions that they were in. They were talking about AI. This is the relation that you talked about.
Yeah.
You were saying that, was saying that, with AI, you have data, you have knowledge, they will, a lot of times, you get it, they will feature this also. It's discernment. To be able to discern what that data and knowledge and information, whether it's correct, whether it's useful or not. We have, internet, we got all kinds of TikTok, ridiculous. And that, that's the main thing. And a lot tells us in the blind thing. Thinking on a lot. That's thinking. So that's something that's very important. They, especially, say, I something one of them I'll be there. Somebody man was Muhammad dressed to be talking about the idols. You say those people at that time were very wise. They knew those idols like this stuff. They represented something in society. Control. Yeah, when we said that this Shaitan wanted to control, he came to control the water, the land, the waters, and the last to control the air. The information goes across the internet and the air. So he can control the minds of the people. If we're not discerning, then we can fall and trap those things that are harmful.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. Thank you. I want to close with three, hopefully, practical reminders for us. Number one, well, before I give the three, I'll say number one is that we want our young people working with us, right? Working with us because we're not going to be here forever, right? So, and that's something that's to be modeled, right? You learn how to work intergenerational, right? We are very much we talked about this yesterday at Project. When we think about the story of Musa alayhi salam, children of Israel, Exodus, we are both. We are Musa, we are deliverance, and the ones waiting to be delivered. Right? We're both of those things. So as we have been delivered from false worship, as we have been delivered into consciousness, our whole intention is to bring others along with us. Now, here are the points that I want to give us. We got to remember that one, there's something called trauma-informed care. Some of you may be familiar with this term, but just consider it like this. If you are saving a drowning person, you do not save them by trying to swim up to them. You got to almost sneak up on them. Okay? If there's a lesson, come up behind them so that they cannot hurt you, they can't hurt themselves, and you get them to safety. There's a lesson that we take from the destruction of the idols and the pushback, the rejection from the people is that these were traumatized people. These are people who were beholden to idols. They were beholden to a way of life that actually was actually taking away from them. It was actually harming them, but they were ready to defend it. So we have to understand that is still very much the environment that we live in today, that people will defend the institutions, they will defend the practices, they will defend a culture that is actually killing them. So we have to be wise in the way that we approach people. And we have to approach them in ways that, we can be combative, right? That's why Allah also tells us, says, don't speak ill of their gods because they in their ignorance might speak ill of Allah, right? So there's a wisdom that has to take place in that. Second thing is this, media has an outsourced influence on culture. If there's film, television, all these podcasts, all these things out here, if there's any area that that is open for us, and there's all these areas are open, but if there's an area where there's immediacy that is needed, where we can have that kind of approach, it is in the media. Right? It's in the media. And it's for us to determine how to do that. And the last thing I'm going to say is that all of the successes of the past, they were dependent upon one thing. It's not just the faith that they had on Allah, but it's also having faith in one another. So if we don't have faith in each other, If we don't believe in each other, then none of this is for anything. And we'll know we have faith in each other when we see that we're working together more. Not just coming together for, presentations to talk, but that we're actually doing substantive work together. So we have to, so the spiritual sentiments are there. We have to work on what is our practical application. I just mentioned one of the words, right? Wisdom is in the room. One of the things, is in the media. It's certainly economics. It's always going to be the case. But right now, our culture is being influenced more and more by what the camera is focused on. So we got to get our own cameras. We got to figure, and we have to start echoing and repeating and broadcasting these positive messages that because some of us are already out there in the media. All right, so we have to take that upon ourselves. So inshallah, Allah will bless us in our endeavors and our intent to be a healing for humanity. Allah will bless us to strike those idols as they were stricken before, and like I said, to bring healing for our nation and for the world, inshallah. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. Amen. Right. Assalamu alaikum. We went over a little bit. The sisters, I know the sister, you want me to announce y'all? Okay, so the sisters now have a sisters scarf swap that is taking place on the other side, the dining room side. Brothers, you can't go over there. All right. So if y'all got to leave, y'all can leave now, or you can go to the other side, to the front. Huh? Oh, we got some light refreshments. All right. I am famished. Okay, so we'll eat first, and then after that, the sisters scarf swap.
You didn't give the number of institutions.
Oh, the reference is how these institutions these are controlled by very few.
That's the number about how many.
No, just kind of okay. So there's been a concerted effort to gain control over the public life, right? Really, it's a mass enslavement that's going on. You got more people that are in economic slavery, right? We're fortunate there are no debtor prisons anymore, right? Because some of us might not be in here right? But we still, nonetheless, economic slavery. Huh?
Two manufacturers books.
Yeah.
Yeah, keeping the slaves and control exactly what we give them.
Exactly. And the number of we think about the banks, they underwrite housing policy, mortgages, right? So housing policy, interest rates, business loans, the educational policy, right? Student loans, all of these things, right? It goes back to these five banking institutions, right? So their policies, they have an outsized influence, on our daily lives. And we didn't even mention the insurance industry, which is a whole other thing. We didn't even talk about hospitals, right? The medical institutions, right? So these are all owned by a very, very few.
Let's say Rockefeller had in all of that, whereas he invested so much money into the media, not the media, but the medical. Because his byproducts of oil were producing some type of vitamins or something like that. I don't want to miss, I don't want to mislead, but
no, you're right. He gave millions of dollars to universities for them to basically. He's basically the founder. I can say the founder, but he really pushed allopathic medicine that it don't really the big pharma. He was the root of that.
as far as the banking system, no,
Rockefeller. Yeah, John D. Rockefeller. So yeah, so I mentioned all of those things just to point out the fact that there's a concerted effort for control, right? And they're all in alignment together. So if they're in alignment, that means our success is dependent upon us being in alignment together, right? All right, I'm feeling good.